David Augsburger, a professor at Fuller Theological Seminary, said, "Since nothing we intend is ever faultless, and nothing we attempt is ever without error, and nothing we achieve without some measure of finitude and fallibility, what we call humanness, we are saved by forgiveness." Now, what do we mean by forgiveness? Now, we have regards to bird brain, but I think we can do a little bit more than what was said previously. Forgiveness is when a victim intentionally goes through a process of changing their feelings and attitudes regarding an offense or hurt. Forgiveness happens as a person lets go of negative feelings such as hatred and resentment and wanting to take revenge, and replacing them with wishing the offender well. Forgiveness is different from condoning the hurt. Forgiveness is not excusing the offender. We still hold the offender responsible. We still see the hurt as wrong. Forgiveness is not pardoning, such as a judge issuing a free pass. Forgiveness is not forgetting. It is not removing the hurt from our consciousness. And forgiveness is not the restoration of a relationship, although forgiveness may be needed for there to be a reconciliation. Forgiveness is giving up all claims of a debt. Forgiveness is letting go of the demand to be owed something. Now, we all have something that we need to be forgiven for, and we all have something that we need to forgive. We have all carried grudges, and we have all carried guilt and shame that need to be atoned. We have all been hurt by someone, and we have all hurt someone else, whether we might have been aware of it or not. We all carry the effects of past hurts which have been locked into grudges or frozen into guilt and shame. These past hurts, which have become long-term grudges and guilts and shame, influence the present in irrational, debilitating, and harmful ways. People who have been hurt all too often go on to hurt other people. And in doing so, the cycle of hurt and division goes on and on. And the only way to break the cycle of hurt is by forgiveness. Forgiveness is the only way to mend relationships, to reconcile people, and to create a healthy environment. And because of that, all religions recognize that forgiveness is vital to all human relationships. Now, the scriptures today tell us of two stories about forgiveness. The story of Joseph and his brothers highlights the tremendously generosity of Joseph to forgive his brothers, while in the gospel lesson, Jesus tells a parable of the tremendous stinginess of a slave who was forgiven a great debt, but would not forgive someone who owed him. The scriptures as a whole speak of forgiveness. There is God's forgiveness of our transgressions of God's will, and there is God calling on us to forgive one another. But the scriptures do not really talk about forgiving ourselves. Forgiving ourselves is what I want to concentrate on today, because oftentimes we need to forgive ourselves before we can forgive somebody else. Some years ago, a colleague of mine was counseling a Vietnam veteran who had asked for help. The veteran was painfully troubled over what he had experienced during his deployment. He told the pastor story after story in gory detail of what had happened to him in Vietnam. And then the veteran paused, perhaps because he was worn out, or perhaps he was waiting for a response, or both, and the pastor asked him, well, what he wanted. And the veteran said he wanted to be forgiven. So the pastor said that God could and would forgive, certainly would forgive this man if he'd ask. And the veteran replied that he believed that God could forgive him, but he could not forgive himself. Sometimes the hardest person to forgive is ourselves. But quite often, the most important person to forgive is ourselves. Forgiving ourselves can mean freeing us from a life of useless regret and bitterness, guilt and shame. Forgiving ourselves can also mean being able to reconcile with others. And how we forgive ourselves is reflected in how we forgive other people. If we cannot forgive ourselves, well, then it is most likely that we cannot forgive anyone else. But then again, many of us are harder on ourselves, and therefore less forgiving of ourselves than we are on other people. Now, I got a clip here, so let's take a look at a clip about forgiving ourselves. Well, obviously there was more to that than I showed you, but I figure you get the point. Video clip, it tells us that forgiving ourselves can increase our well-being and increase our happiness. Holding on to past hurts and offenses robs us of our present energy, as well as our mental well-being and just our overall well-being. Carrying a grudge hurts us. Sometimes carrying a grudge and not forgiving someone is our way of trying to punish the offender. We refuse to reconcile or relate with the person we feel who has hurt us in an effort to make them feel guilty and to make them want to apologize. Maybe we're too proud and demand the offender do more to make up for the offense than they have already done. But there are many times when the offender is either unaware of offending us or does not care that they have offended us. So we are left holding the bag of bitterness and resentment all by ourselves. And we won't let go until someone notices us and begs us for forgiveness. Many of us hold on to that bag for a lifetime. Most of us here are still living with the scars that our parents gave us. Many of us still hold our parents responsible for our unhappiness in life. Our parents were flawed human beings like ourselves, and they parented with us in flawed ways. But they did the best they could, as I'm sure that you have done the best that you could raising your children. We all need to forgive our parents and to forgive ourselves because we are limited and we are finite human beings. Why do we hold on to bitterness and resentment when it does more to poison our own mental and emotional well-being than anyone else? Why do we insist on continuing to hurt ourselves when others are long over whatever it was or were never bothered in the first place? Well, one reason why we hold on to our hurt and anger is in an attempt to protect ourselves from being hurt again or having more hurt piled on us. We fear that if we forgive, that we will forget and fail to protect ourselves from further offenses. But the truth is, more often, that by holding on, we will actually set ourselves up for more hurt. By holding on, we will always be sensitive to being hurt, and thus it doesn't take a whole lot to offend us. Being sensitive also means that we will avoid situations where we think that we will be hurt, and we won't have those relationships or those experiences. Failing to forgive ourselves can be like looking over your shoulder for your whole long life. And sometimes we are the offender, and we need to make amends. We are the ones who need to be forgiven. But some may never forgive, and we must forgive ourselves. Another reason may be that we have a heightened sense of ourselves, and we expect more of ourselves than is rational or reasonable. Some people think that when they were a child, they could have stopped an older person from abusing them. Irrationally, they think these people think that they had the physical and emotional and psychological strength to fend off an older adult. These people need to forgive themselves because they are not strong enough, nor did they receive the support from other adults that they needed. It was not their fault that they were abused. But other people, in order to justify themselves, may have blamed them, blamed the victim. Sometimes we hold on to our hurts because we feel we have not been punished enough for the offense that we have done or the offense that people did to us. How many times have we heard or said to ourselves, "Oh, I can never forgive myself for what I did," or "I can never forgive myself for allowing myself to be fooled like that or hurt like that. I should have known better. I should have done something about it." On and on we go, holding on to the hurt because we think that we were smarter and stronger than we really were. We can punish ourselves because we feel we should have protected and had the ability to protect ourselves better. And maybe you were smart or strong enough on another day or at a different time, but not then. Some days we are more stupid and weaker than other days. And so it is time to let ourselves off the hook that we have been dangling from, and to let ourselves out of the prison that we have made for ourselves, and forgive ourselves and forgive the other person or people. Forgiveness is recognizing that we are human, and that we do not and we cannot know or do everything. But then oftentimes forgiving ourselves or others takes us recognizing that we are smarter and stronger than we thought we were. I think it helps for us to know that forgiveness is not a once and for all thing that is done. Forgiveness is a process. It's not a destination. It's a journey. And it can take a continued and sustained effort on our part. Forgiveness can be a lot like grieving. Stages of grief outlined by Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross also apply to forgiveness. Stages are denial, bargaining, anger, depression, and finally acceptance. I had a friend tell me that sometimes he had to get angry and hate a person before he could forgive them and love them. Well, that observation fits right in line with the stages of grief and the stages of forgiveness. For our own well-being and health, as well as the well-being and the health of our families and our faith community, we need to grieve our losses and to forgive our offenses. We must learn to forgive for our own health. Not to forgive is to carry the burdens of old wounds which damage the present and narrow our futures. To hold on to the past hurts and offenses is to keep ourselves a victim, and being a victim is not healthy in the long term. To be a victim can also be a way to avoid responsibility. To say the devil made us, hurt someone or offend someone else, well, that's to keep yourself a victim, and it avoids responsibility. Forgiving ourselves is a means of taking back our lives and being responsible. Forgiving other people is a means of taking back our lives and being responsible. Forgiving God for making an imperfect world is a means of reconnecting with the source of life and love. And God showed us forgiveness when Jesus came to earth and died for us. Jesus showed us the extent of his love for us and how far he was willing to go to forgive us. God forgave us to let us know that it's okay for us to forgive ourselves. Sometimes we need permission to forgive ourselves, and God has given us permission. So let me say, by the power vested in me, I declare that you, as you have sincerely confessed your offenses and wrongdoings, you are forgiven in the name of Jesus. So go and live your life as forgiven and forgiving people. Amen.